The 2023 NFL Scouting Combine is officially here, and we preview it from a Baltimore Ravens perspective, talking about key players to watch, looking at drills, also talking a bit more about the Lamar Jackson situation and how easy or hard it is for the Ravens to move forward without a resolution on the whole situation. We'll also talk about mock drafts on Twitter and analyze those, and much more coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I am your host here with you, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. And thank you so much for being here with us today. Every day on Locked On Ravens, 5 days per week. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms, including over on video form on YouTube. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we are back here. It is a Tuesday, a Taco Tuesday episode of the show. And we have Combine talk. The Combine officially here for the NFL is about a week long. It's February 28th today until March 6th. So Tuesday to Monday, we'll be going through all the positional groups. But I do want to do almost like a full Combine preview for the Ravens in this first segment and talk about key players to watch, what drills the Ravens should be looking out for, historical trends with the Ravens in the Combine, and just what to look for and what they have looked for over the course of their franchise history, especially recently. So we'll talk about that in the first segment. In the second segment, we will talk more about Lamar Jackson. I know it has been recurring, but there's nothing to be said. The situation is still at large. We don't know anything. And until something is known, until there's a resolution, there are going to be talking points. And I know there have been people talking about Lamar's lack of agent. I know it's been a conversation that's popped up a lot. But we're going to be talking about that and also how easy or hard it is for the Ravens to kind of move forward with their offseason without a resolution of this whole thing. And then in the final segment, we'll be looking at more mock drafts that we got from Twitter for our mock draft Sunday. We went over some of them yesterday. We're going to be looking over more today. So a jam-packed episode of Locked On Ravens today. If you are here with us in audio form, so Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere, Spotify, anywhere, thank you so much for tuning in with us. Be sure to follow along. And if you hear us in video form on YouTube, it is the same show, both audio and video. Big shout out to audio listeners and shout out to video watchers. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. Our next goal, 4,000 subscribers on Locked On Ravens, right over 3.5K right now. So really grateful for all the support. Here we are at Daily Ravens podcast 5 days a week. So any Ravens news, analysis, updates, and more, we have you covered Monday through Friday. But let's now talk about the Combine. And this is a big week for the Ravens and of course the entire NFL. It gives you a better chance as a team to go and look at some of these guys. Now, not every team sends everybody anymore. There are teams that don't send anybody. There are teams that send the coach, not the GM. Some send the GM, not the coach. And so we've seen for the Ravens, I think a couple years ago, John Harbaugh broke his leg or broke his ankle or he had to have something. He got injured, I think, and had to either have an operation. I can't remember the whole story, but I don't think he went that year to the Combine. And we've seen teams, there have been teams that just literally don't send anyone. They do stuff virtually, or they just get the tape and they don't feel the need to be there. So for the Ravens, I mean, obviously Eric DeCosta, went last year, had the big Combine presser. I'm sure we'll get one of those at some point throughout the course of the week. Nothing like that's been scheduled, at least I don't think at the time of this recording. But it's a big week because it's different this year for the Ravens. And this kind of ties into what I want to talk about in the second segment, which is like, where do the Ravens focus with all of this attention on the Lamar situation in terms of how much are they going to put into watching guys like Anthony Richardson and Will Levis and CJ Stroud throw at the Combine? Bryce Young's going to wait till his pro day at Alabama. But if you're looking at one of these top quarterback options, obviously I would assume the Ravens would move on from Lamar if they were to pick one of these top quarterback options. I know there's been the idea floated that, they should pick one and then keep Lamar, but I don't agree with that. But so it's different this year because it's about how much energy you put into the quarterbacks and then where are the other positions that you're looking at. I mean, for me, I've made it very known wide receiver and corner are my the two needs or the two positions I'm looking at this year, especially. And so I'm looking at key players to watch. we can start on the let's start defensive. We can start on the defensive side of the ball here because there are plenty of corners. This is an extremely deep cornerback class. There are multiple guys who are in many people's top 100 big boards, and even some guys who fall out of that top 100 would be top 100 guys in almost any other draft. Now I know there's a lot of back and forth on who the top guy in this draft could be. I think it's Devin Witherspoon. I know some people lean Christian Gonzalez. I think he's probably my number 2 here. But there are so many good ones. I mean, I'm interested to see Devin Witherspoon. I'm interested to see guys like Gonzalez and Cam Smith. I mean, there's such a list. Like Joey Porter Jr. is one of my favorite, and probably it's almost like what Rashad Bateman was to me in 2021, which was the Ravens were never, going to get a Jamar Chase. They were never going to get a guy in that draft like a Jalen Waddle or a Devonta Smith. They weren't going to trade up into that range. Now, this year's different because if they trade Lamar, they could get a top 5 pick. They could get the number 2 overall pick from the Texans potentially. But if the Ravens stay at 22, I think the most realistic target that would be number 1 on my board would be Joey Porter Jr. in terms of potential to fall. Now, do I think he falls? No. But when I mean realistic, what I said with Rashad Bateman is I don't think he makes it to the Ravens at 27, but that's the most realistic option out of all the guys, the top 4, top 5 guys at that position to fall if there were to be a guy to fall. So for me, although I don't think Joey Porter Jr. is going to fall, he would be my top guy. I love Joey Porter Jr. this draft cycle. I think he would be a phenomenal addition to what the Ravens have and, kind of trying to build out that corner room again. Other guys people are looking at here, Keely Ringo, someone from Georgia who a lot of people have their eye on. There are others like Travius Hodges-Tomlinson who could be really, really good. He's a shorter guy, so we're going to have to look a little bit about what the sizes are of these corners, but I can see the Ravens easily taking 2 corners. Then you have the Maryland guys, Deontay Banks, really good. Jacorian Bennett, another one who I think is going to get a lot of run and a lot of talk throughout these last couple of weeks here before the draft. And it's coming up. It is coming up actually decently fast. But then you have the wide receivers that you have to look at here. Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith and Jigba, guys like Zay Flowers and Tank Dell, Jalen Hyatt, even, mid-tier-ish guys like a Parker Washington. These are all prospects that the Ravens could be in on, especially because my ideal scenario for the Ravens is them taking wide receiver corner or corner wide receiver with their first 2 picks, assuming everything stays the way it is right now. If Lamar Jackson's traded, obviously that changes, but that's why the combine is so interesting this year for the Ravens, because they could be picking literally anywhere in this draft. Probably not number 1 because that's Chicago's pick, and I don't think they're in the market for Lamar Jackson unless they want to move on from Justin Fields. And based off reports, it does not look like that is going to be the case. So they could be picking anywhere in this draft from 2 on. It's that. Obviously, some teams don't need a quarterback. You're not going to trade Lamar to Cincinnati. That's not an option. But in terms of range, you could be picking really earlier for the Ravens in the first round. You could be picking at 22, and that's fine. Or you could trade back if you're the Ravens and pick up a late first and a second rounder in that deal, then have options with that, and then you're kind of replenishing your draft capital that way. So in terms of actual drills at the combine, and there are other positions. Offensive line has been one, and we've talked with Spencer Schultz about this a lot here, and we talked about it with him last year. Arm length is a pretty big deal for the Ravens. There aren't a lot of players on the offensive line, especially tackle-wise. The Ravens don't love short arm tackles. They like guys with arm length. So are the Ravens going to be in a market for the tackle this draft? Maybe. I don't think a DeJuan Jones is someone who they're going to take this year, but maybe there's a mid-round tackle they really like. They obviously have Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses. They drafted Daniel Falele last year. They have Patrick McCary who can kind of slot in if you need him to. So I'm not, offensive tackle is not a need for him, but the offensive line trend for Baltimore for the most part. And again, we were talking about Tyler Linderbaum last draft cycle where it was, he's too small of a center, he doesn't fit the Ravens scheme, and he ended up coming in and playing pretty well. So again, these trends that the Ravens have, they can be broken, but with just the uncertainty of what the Ravens are going to actually be doing during this draft in terms of where they're actually going to be picking, it's anyone's guess. I mean, safeties, I know Brian Branch is someone who is going to be a first rounder. Spencer tweeted about him yesterday and said that, he and Kyle Hamilton in the same system, and everybody's saying safety, 2 safeties in a row. But Brian Branch is versatile. Like he's more of a defensive back guy. He can play anywhere. And Mike McDonald in his defense, Cal Hamilton and Brian Branch would be pretty cool. Running backs too. Running backs, Bijan Robinson is going to participate. I still am not on to take Bijan Robinson in the first round group. I know there are some people who would like that, some people who wouldn't. I'm not team take running back in the first round. If Bijan Robinson falls to the third round after the Ravens take a wide receiver in a corner, sign me up. I'm with it. And that's not, I'm not shading how good Bijan Robinson is. He is a good player, but at the same time, I just don't think it's what the Ravens need right now. But could be a sneaky need next offseason or even this offseason with Gus Edwards potentially being a cap casualty and J.K. Dobbins entering a contract year this year. So something to keep an eye on there. But in terms of drills, looking at the 40-yard dash is something that Kyle Hamilton fell pretty much because of his 40-yard dash time. People said it wasn't fast enough. And, how's he going to be able to cover guys with that speed and play at that speed? 40-yard dash time, I value game speed more than straight line combine 40-yard dash speed. Some teams take it really seriously. Other teams don't. Then you have, testing strength with the bench press. You got 3 cone drills, 20-yard shuttles, vertical jumps, which, test verticals. You got broad jumps as well. So there are a lot of drills that teams will be looking at throughout the course of this. Obviously, there'll be interviews as well. Guys will have the chance to impress the scouting department, the coaches during interviews. And it's a whole process. So I think Baltimore is going to be very involved. There are hundreds of prospects that the Ravens could potentially be interested in here. But again, I think wide receiver and corner are the two. I listed off some of those names there. And then, running back wise, maybe, we talked about Keaton Mitchell yesterday from ECU, one of those mid to late round guys the Ravens could be keeping their eye on there. Maybe they do some scouting work on Bijan Robinson. And then quarterback wise, obviously we talked about those, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and C.J. Stroud. Young's going to wait. Bryce Young's going to wait to Alabama. But plenty of interesting conversations around the combine. And again, it's a pretty much week-long process, so we'll be having more conversations on it throughout the course of the rest of the week here. But coming up in our second segment, we'll be flipping to Lamar Jackson, a situation we've talked about a lot here on Locked On Ravens, talking a bit about the whole agent points that have been made over the course of the last couple of days. Also talk about the Ravens' journey while there is still an unresolved Lamar Jackson situation. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to dive into on the show. But first, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. And if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you have to try a Built Bar. And I know we got through the holidays almost a couple months ago now, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. And if you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then I've got just the thing for you in Built. And with Built, healthy is actually tasty. They're so delicious you won't even think they're good for you because they do taste that good. And what makes Built Bar so good is, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And they also only have 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now you don't even have to wait around and get a box for years. We've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors such as brownie batter and churro. Get your hands on a Built Bar. You can thank me later. We return here. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here, and we're now going to dive into the Lamar Jackson situation a little bit more, and from, I guess, a little different perspective. Now, there were some tweets over the last 24 hours, and it was a clip from Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, and he was talking with Chris Sims about how, Lamar reportedly had a shoe deal fall through from this whole no agent situation, and, him not having an agent cost him a shoe deal, and this, that, and the other, and an agent could have sealed a shoe deal for him. And Lamar ended up responding to the claim with kind of that LeBron James looking up meme, was like, what are you talking, what? It's kind of like that. So that to me is an indication that he's like, what in the world is going on here? What are we talking about? This is news to me type deal. Again, he didn't actually come out and say that, but the meme, I think it says a lot. But regardless, there's been the conversation of, well, if Lamar had an agent, this would have been over so long ago, and, his team isn't putting him in the right position. And I know there's been a lot of that conversation, and the Ravens have already negotiated recently with someone else who didn't have an agent in Roquan Smith. That deal, 5-year, $100 million deal. We had Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears here on the show right after the Ravens actually traded for Roquan Smith. And he talked about how St. Omni was kind of Roquan Smith's representative, kind of the guy to go through, and that was like his team. St. Omni was the guy, and the Ravens and Roquan and St. Omni, they got the deal done. And for Lamar, this has been a situation where people are saying just, pay the agent fee, the amount of 3.5% or whatever percent agents take, 5-7 is, only this amount of money and this, that, and the other. Lamar's made the decision, obviously, to go through this process without the agent, getting guidance from the NFLPA. And, I know there's been a lot of conversation of his mom being involved in the process and his team and whatnot. But there are the nuances, and we've made these points on this show before about what having an agent versus not having an agent in these situations does. Now, we've heard a lot of leaked reports that, things getting recycled over and over again, things getting put out there, what is true, what is not true. There are all those questions. These things, how much of it are the Ravens putting things out here in trying to spark up something in terms of, well, we want this to be known. We want to have Lamar's camp hear this. With an agent, you hear some of those leaks from the other side too, but there hasn't been any like concrete, like, oh yes, this is like, there's only been very little. Like Lamar talked to Diana Rossini of ESPN and said, yeah, this is what I was offered. Like there's only been one or two actual, well, maybe a little more, but there's been very little concrete, yes, this is actually true information. What a lot of people know right now is, look, the guaranteed money is definitely the sticking point here, at least the major one, and that's what it has been. But with the agent, I know, pretty much what the Ravens are doing right now is going through Lamar's team and whatnot. So a lot of the stuff that Eric DaCosta and the department would say to an agent, they're saying to Lamar, they're saying to Lamar's team. So it's the thing that, Spencer's made this point, and other guests on the show, and I've made the point as well, where the Ravens are pretty much saying, yeah, Lamar, we want to pay you, but this is why we can't give you this. This is why we don't think you're worthy of a fully guaranteed deal. This is why we don't want to give you a fully guaranteed deal. And you're saying that to the guy's face or to the guy's team's face. And it's just a different dynamic. And obviously we've heard what Mark Andrews has had to say about Lamar and, him wanting to be a Raven for life. We've heard what Lamar has to say. We've heard what the Ravens have had to say. But as we all do know, look, I think Lamar deserves a huge contract. I think he is fully deserving of getting his money. I've been on that point for months, but we do know that a fully guaranteed contract would hinder the Ravens from doing maybe what they want to do in terms of roster flexibility. And so it comes down to how much roster flexibility do they want to give up to give Lamar a fully guaranteed deal? Well, right now, neither side appears to be budging. And who knows if an agent would help with that or not, because if it truly is, and I'm sure it's not as simple as this, but if it truly is the simple point of Lamar wants fully guaranteed money, the Ravens aren't going to give Lamar a fully guaranteed deal right now. How much is an agent helping that process? It's a good question. I don't really know. So that's just something that I saw on Twitter, but also a point that, and I'm going to expand on this, I think, in a show either this week or next week, but the process for Lamar right now and for the Ravens in particular, it's such an unknown, where for Baltimore, like, we can just cast the Lamar side of this out for a second. The Ravens don't have any idea right now, or at least we don't think they do, who their quarterback is going to be in 2023, because this Lamar situation has them in such limbo at the moment, where we talked in the last segment about what in the world are they going to do with the combine, because we don't know if they're going to be looking at these top flight quarterbacks in the draft because they're going to get the 8th pick for Lamar or the 10th pick or the 2nd pick for Lamar. We don't know what's happening. So can the Ravens move forward with their full offseason plan without knowing what Lamar in that situation is going to, what the end resolution is going to be? Is it a trade? Is it an extension? Is it a franchise tag? My prediction, and this is just like a soft one, is a lot of people are pretty sure he's probably going to get a franchise tag. Now, if that's non-exclusive or exclusive, we're not necessarily sure yet. In terms, we've heard multiple rumblings from people about, oh, well, they're definitely going to exclusive franchise tag him, or there's going to be a non-exclusive on the table. But a lot of people, whether that's through Twitter or just reports that have come out, people are pretty sure he's going to get a franchise tag, because obviously they're not going to let him walk for nothing. But then what comes after that? If the Ravens don't trade Lamar and they sign him to a long-term extension, obviously I think that impacts how free agency goes and how the draft goes. If the Ravens trade him away and they get draft picks and players, that's going to impact how their offseason goes in terms of free agency and the draft. So ideally, at least in my world, this Lamar domino, whatever it is, if it's an extension, if it's a trade, if the Ravens sign him to the franchise tag and he plays on the franchise tag this year, that has to be done before free agency, in my opinion. It just, it leaves them in too much limbo to have that situation still looming by the time free agency opens. And you don't know what the money is you're going to have to spend. You don't know what the cap situation is going to be. I'm sure there's a rough idea, but you have to kind of operate with if they're 50-50 on trading him or keeping him, or if Lamar's like, I don't know what I'm going to do here if they're not offering me a fully guaranteed deal. Am I going to sign X franchise tag or whatnot? Am I going to demand a trade? It's just hopefully something gets resolved by the time free agency starts so that the Ravens will have enough time to figure out and formulate a full. And look, I'm sure they have a plan for if Lamar stays and a plan for if Lamar goes. I'm not saying they're unprepared, but in terms of the actual money, guys their markets fluctuate and they change every day on the free agent market. And you only have, we saw how free agency went over the first couple of days, especially for the Ravens, where they did nothing on the first day. And then they go out there and they sign Marcus Williams and Morgan Moses. A lot of the guys go in the first 3 days of free agency, during that initial period. So hopefully something's done by then. We'll see what ends up happening. Of course, as that has been the saying here, we'll see what happens. But coming up on Locked On Ravens in our final segment, we'll be turning to Twitter, looking at some mock drafts that we got over there. We'll be running out the show that way, so be sure to stay tuned. Still lots to dive into on the show. We return here. It's our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still talking with you here, and we're now going to dive into mock drafts. Before we do that, though, again, I will say be sure to subscribe on YouTube, like the video over in video form and in audio form. Be sure to follow along anywhere you get your podcast. But again, we got mock drafts on Twitter. I did a mock draft Sunday on Twitter. We reviewed it on yesterday's episode. I did a full Ravens 7-round mock draft. And then on Twitter, you can put your mock drafts below my mock drafts, and I'll try to get to it, read that out here on the show. We got, again, a ton of engagement, almost 50 mock drafts this week. So, again, thank you for the engagement on those, and we're going to get to as many as I can here on this show here today, and hopefully on shows throughout the rest of the week here. So we'll start off here with Justin P., my guy Justin P. here, the host of the Keep That Same Energy podcast. And we first have a trade where the Ravens get the 12th overall pick for Patrick Queen. That's value for Patrick Queen. They take Devin Witherspoon, the corner from Illinois. Then you have Jordan Addison, the wide receiver from USC at pick number 22. Then the Ravens get the 33rd overall pick for Chuck Clark. This is value all across the board here for the Ravens. They take Deonte Banks, the corner from Maryland. Then Carl Brooks, the Bowling Green edges at 86. Michael Wilson, the Stanford wideout at 125. Cam Jones, Indiana linebacker at 159. And Javarius Owens, the Houston safety at pick number 200. Now, I will say, I would bump the value down a little bit on Patrick Queen and Chuck Clark if those two were to go. I'd say Patrick Queen, if the Ravens do move on, I'd say probably, again, I'd trade him for nothing less than a second rounder. So I'll say a second rounder is probably more realistic in this. I don't think Houston's giving up 12 for him. I think that's a win for the Ravens if that happens, though. You get to kind of reset on that whole thing. Although I still think Patrick Queen is a good player, and I'm still team keep Patrick Queen unless you get a deal like this for him. And then Chuck Clark, I'm probably bumping that second rounder down to I think a third at best, fourth, kind of third, fourth range. But hey, you know what? That's what it is. This is what Justin P gave us here. So, I mean, I like the draft though. I think Devin Witherspoon again is my top guy in this class. Jordan Addison, I think another wide receiver who can fall. And he's my Joey Porter Jr., the wide receiver, someone who I don't think is going to be there at 22. But if he is there, I'm running that card up for him. Deonte Banks, again, a very solid corner. So you get corner, wide receiver, corner. You revamp that corner room with Devin Witherspoon and Deonte Banks. Then you get an edge. You get another wideout. You get a linebacker, a safety. Look, if this is how the draft ends up for the Ravens, and you still keep Lamar in this situation too, and you get a first and another one of that, you get 2 firsts, a second. You replenish the draft capital there. I'll take this one. I'll take this one from Justin P for sure. Next, we have a draft here from Mitch, who says, pay Lamar and get proven wide receivers instead of drafting them. Peters and Queen are gone, so draft their replacements. Same with Gus probably. Also, not sure how PFF thinks the cards value Chuck that much, but I will take it. So I actually agree with, before I read it, I actually agree with this where I'm all for a wideout in the first round. Do not get me wrong. But if there was a choice for me, and I'm on record saying this, if there was a choice for me in terms of if the Ravens were to have the option to either trade or sign a wide receiver, I'll say trade. Either trade for a star wide receiver and draft a corner, or trade for a star corner and draft a wide receiver. I'm trading for the star wide receiver and drafting the corner. That's what I'm doing there. So Mitch has the Ravens taking Joey Porter Jr., the corner from Penn State, at number 22. Then there's a trade where the Ravens trade Patrick Queen and the 125th overall pick for Brandon Cooks and the 73rd overall pick. All right, I like that deal, actually. All right, I like that. So Derek Hall, the Auburn edge, is the pick at 73. Then you have Drew Sanders, the Arkansas linebacker, at 86. Antonio Mafi, the UCLA guard, is at number 159. And then you have the Ravens trading Chuck Clark for DeAndre Hopkins in a 5th. I think that one's a little less realistic, but you know what? I will take it if I were the Ravens. Then the Ravens end up taking Israel Abanikanda, the Pittsburgh running back, at number 169. And then the Ravens take R.P. Miller Jr., the Jackson State linebacker, at number 200. So this is a no wide receiver draft where the Ravens get both Brandon Cooks and DeAndre Hopkins next to Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay, plus Joey Porter Jr. You get edge depth, linebackers, you get guard for the Ben Powers potentially leaving, a running back. This is actually the actual vision that Mitch has here. I do not disagree with the vision that Mitch has in terms of getting the vet wide receivers, assuming they are worth either a big contract or the draft capital, and then kind of redoing the corner room with a star at that position, and then maybe signing a veteran or two because you still have to revamp that room. So I agree with the vision a little bit with Mitch here and what he has. And again, getting a guy like Joey Porter Jr., then also leaving the draft with Brandon Cooks and DeAndre Hopkins, I think a lot of Ravens fans will be happy with that. I think the Brandon Cooks, Patrick Queen swap is a little more realistic than Chuck Clark for DeAndre in the 5th. But you know what? If the mock draft simulator gives it to you, you take it, as Mitch makes sure to say there. So solid mock draft there from Mitch. Then you have, let's do one here from Eric Sikafouche Jr., who has the Ravens actually trading down from pick 22 to pick 25 and picking up an extra 3rd in the process as the Ravens trade 22 for 25 and 89. I'd say solid value. Again, I would still maybe want to get a 2nd out of that deal instead of a 3rd, but only trading down 3 picks. You can only get so much. So Zay Flowers, the wide receiver from Boston College, is the pick of 25. Then Tank Dell. All right, so we have the wide receiver. You get Tank Dell at 86 here for the Ravens. Then Travius Hodges Tomlinson, the TCU corner. Then Jacorian Bennett, the Maryland corner, at 125. Colby Wooden, the edge from Auburn, defensive line from Auburn, at 159. Then Eric Gray, running back from Oklahoma, at 200. So this is wide receiver, corner. So this is the ultimate needs-based draft here from Eric, which, I mean, I like that. I like Zay Flowers a lot. I think Tank Dell, again, it depends for the Ravens. I think with what Dell and Zay Flowers give you, you might want to have a little more size, but I still agree with the whole premise of, look, you got to get the wide receiver situation figured out. You got to get the corner situation figured out. So I'm on board with this from Eric, although I think for, my idea, like if this were to be perfect, the Ravens would have gotten a 2nd rounder in that trade back deal instead of a 1st. So, all right, let's do Mark Davis, a mock draft from Mark Davis, who says there's a whole show right here. Oh boy, this is a lot of picks. Okay. Wow. All right. The Ravens trade Lamar Jackson to the Carolina Panthers for DJ Moore, the 9th pick, the 39th pick, the 61st pick, the 93rd pick, a 1st in 2024, and a 1st in 2025. I'm taking that immediately if I'm the Ravens, if that's offered. You get 3 firsts, DJ Moore, 2 seconds and a 3rd for Lamar. That's a good one. But the interesting part here is no quarterback is taken. Christian Gonzalez, the Oregon corner, is a pick number 9. Zay Flowers, Boston College wide receivers at 22. Andre Carter, the 2nd. Army edge is at 39. Darnell Washington, Georgia tight end, is at 61. Tank Dell, the Houston wide receiver, is at 88. And how the Ravens got 88 was they traded Charlie Kohler in 86 for 88, 121, and 202. And then they trade 93 to the Commanders for 97 and 152 at 97. Dwayne McBride, the running back from UAB, is the pick. Moro Jomo, the Texas defensive lineman, is at 121. Dorian Williams, the Tulane linebacker, is at 125. Carl Brooks, Bowling Green edge at 152. Jacorian Bennett, Maryland corner, at 159. Stenson Bennett, oh, there he is. Stenson Bennett, Georgia quarterback, at 200. And Asim Richards, the tackle from North Carolina, at 202. All right, deep breath. That was a lot. So, first of all, I talked about the Lamar trade. I like that. Christian Gonzalez, very solid pick at number 9. Zay Flowers, I really like Zay Flowers. You get edge here. Interesting swapping. It's pretty much a swap. Charlie Kohler for Darnell Washington. I mean, I think Washington's a very good prospect. Plus, obviously, it is the Georgia connection with Todd Monken. So maybe that's something where we'll see. Like for Charlie Kohler, maybe some of these guys the Ravens drafted or signed or have in this offense under Todd Monken. Monken's like, I don't know about this guy. So maybe we see a couple of guys moved on from the offensive side of the ball that maybe just don't fit what Monken's vision is. So that's an interesting concept. I'm actually glad Mark did this because it brings up an interesting point. But again, so I'm assuming what Mark has here is the Ravens going with a bridge guy or Tyler Huntley. And I'm not saying reset. I think the Ravens can still be competitive without Lamar Jackson. But, if your guy is, I don't know, it's not Derek Carr is unrealistic for him. But if they roll with Tyler Huntley for the year, how far can they go with Tyler Huntley in this defense and re-adding guys like Zay Flowers and Tank Dell, kind of making this wide receiver room a little more lively? I don't know, but this is how many picks is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is one more pick than the Ravens had last year, and the Ravens couldn't even keep the Ravens don't have room for 12 rookies on their roster. I don't think this year. They just picked 11 guys and they held 10 of them on their roster. So pretty much you would have 22 rookies, assuming you keep everybody from the last 2 drafts on your roster, obviously outside of Tyler Beatty, who was the one who was let go. I think that's just, it's too many rookies at this point. So I would maybe try to package some of these late rounders, move up a little bit. But I like Gonzalez a lot. I like Zay Flowers a lot. But at 9, maybe I'm taking a quarterback there like a Stroud or a Richardson, depending on how you feel about him. And then maybe at like 39, instead of taking Andre Carter, if a guy like, I don't know who would fall in this situation. Cam Sims wouldn't fall. Joey Porter Jr. wouldn't fall. One of those like mid to early tier second round corner guys who maybe fall out of the first round if they're a late first round guy. Maybe I take a corner there. So it's quarterback, wide receiver, cornerback, and then the rest of the draft there. So another great round of mock drafts here. Again, I'll try to get to more of these throughout the week. I'm going to try to have like a crazy show week. So be sure to stay tuned for crazy shows, crazy topics throughout the week here for the Ravens. I'm excited for it, for sure. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Again, one more time, be sure to follow along in audio form, like and subscribe in video form. When we get back here tomorrow, it is more Ravens content on our midweek edition. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.